The call came at 2:17 on a Thursday afternoon while I was presenting our quarterly marketing strategy to potential clients. My phone buzzed against the conference table, and I almost ignored it until I saw Heritage Jewelers flash across the screen. My stomach dropped. That was the store where my grandmother's sapphire ring was being cleaned and resized for my wedding next month. "Miss Mitchell, this is Tom from Heritage Jewelers. Could you come in when you have a moment?" Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. There's been a situation with your ring. His voice carried an odd tension that made my palms sweat. I excused myself from the meeting, telling my colleagues I'd be right back, and drove the 15 minutes to Westgate Shopping Center with my heart hammering. Tom met me at the counter, his weathered face creased with concern. "Miss Mitchell, I need to ask you something directly. Did you authorize anyone else to collect your ring today?" I shook my head, confused. "No, why? Is everything okay?" He disappeared into the back room and returned with a police officer I hadn't noticed sitting in the corner. Officer Martinez stood up, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, a woman came in this morning claiming to be you, with identification and a receipt. She collected the ring and attempted to sell it to us immediately afterward." The words hit me like ice water. Sell it? But that's my grandmother's ring. It's been in our family for 60 years. Tom nodded grimly. That's what concerned us. When she couldn't provide the family history or explain the inscription inside the band, we became suspicious. Then she became agitated when we asked for additional verification. She left quickly, but not before we got her license plate. Officer Martinez flipped through his notes. The woman identified herself as Linda Mitchell. Same last name as you. Any relation? My mouth went dry. Mom, my own mother had stolen my engagement ring. That's my mother, I whispered, sinking into the chair Tom offered. But I don't understand. Why would she take my ring? She mentioned needing money for a family emergency, Tom explained gently. Something about a honeymoon that had been canceled due to insufficient funds. The smell of garlic and herbs hit me as I opened the front door, confirming my suspicions. "Sarah, honey, you're home early," Mom called from the kitchen, her voice artificially bright. "Did your meeting go well?" I found her at the stove, stirring something that smelled like her famous beef stew, wearing the floral apron Emma had given her last Christmas. She looked so normal, so maternal, that for a moment I questioned whether the jewelry store incident had actually happened. "Mom, we need to talk." She glanced over her shoulder, and I watched her face carefully. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" No flicker of guilt, no recognition of wrongdoing. Either she was an incredible actress, or she genuinely believed taking my ring was acceptable. Heritage Jewelers called. They said someone came in, claiming to be me, and took my ring. I studied her reaction, waiting for the confession, the apology, some acknowledgement of what she'd done. Instead, her face went through a series of micro-expressions before settling on confused concern. "That's terrible. Did they call the police?" "Someone impersonating you could ruin your credit, your reputation." The performance was flawless except for the slight tremor in her hands as she continued stirring the stew. I had grown up believing that family meant unconditional support, that the people who raised you would never deliberately harm your future for their own convenience. At 26, I thought I understood the dynamics of our household. Mom managed everyone's emotional needs while Dad handled the practical concerns. Emma was the beloved baby who could do no wrong, while I was the responsible older daughter who handled her own problems without creating drama. This arrangement had worked reasonably well through high school and college. I'd earned scholarships, graduated with honors in marketing, landed a good job at a respected agency in Phoenix, and gotten engaged to Jake Thompson, a software engineer who made me laugh and shared my dreams of traveling the world together. We'd planned a modest wedding for next month, nothing extravagant, just family and close friends at the Desert Botanical Garden, followed by a simple reception. The engagement ring had been the most meaningful part of our entire relationship. Jake had asked my grandmother's permission before she passed away last year, and she'd given him her sapphire ring with tears in her eyes. "This ring has seen 60 years of marriage," she'd told us. It knows how to hold love together through everything. The deep blue stone was surrounded by tiny diamonds that caught light like stars, and the inscription inside read, "Forever begins today," in my grandfather's handwriting. When Jake proposed 6 months ago, he'd taken me to the same desert hiking trail where we'd had our first date 3 years earlier. As the sun set over Camelback Mountain, he'd gotten down on one knee and said, "Sarah, your grandmother told me this ring was waiting for someone who would love as deeply as she did. I think that person is you." The moment felt like everything in my life had led to that perfect instant. Mom had cried when she saw the ring, telling me how proud Grandma would be, how perfect Jake was for our family, how excited she was to help plan the wedding. Dad had shaken Jake's hand and welcomed him officially to the Mitchell clan. Emma had squealed with excitement and immediately started planning her maid of honor speech. Everything felt right, settled, like the life I'd worked toward was finally falling into place. But Emma's own relationship had progressed differently. She'd met Marcus during her senior year of college, and they'd gotten engaged 3 months after graduation, caught up in the romantic whirlwind of young love and endless possibilities. Their wedding had been scheduled for 2 weeks ago, a lavish affair that cost Mom and Dad nearly $20,000 they didn't really have. The plan was for them to honeymoon in Bali for 2 weeks, exploring temples and beaches, creating the Instagram perfect start to married life that Emma had dreamed about since high school. The problem emerged a month before Emma's wedding, when Dad's construction company lost 2 major contracts due to supply chain delays and a client who defaulted on payment. Suddenly, the money they'd earmarked for Emma's honeymoon had to cover basic business expenses to keep the company afloat. Mom and Dad sat Emma down and explained they could still pay for the wedding, but the Bali trip would have to wait. Emma hadn't taken the news well. She'd sobbed for hours about how her friends would judge her for not having a proper honeymoon, how she'd already posted about Bali on social media, how Marcus's family would think the Mitchells were poor. Mom had spent days consoling her, promising they'd find a solution, assuring her that everything would work out. I'd offered to contribute what I could toward the honeymoon, but my savings were earmarked for my own wedding expenses and the down payment Jake and I were accumulating for our first house together. Emma had smiled tightly and said she understood, but I could see the resentment in her eyes. In her mind, I was choosing my future over her happiness, prioritizing my relationship over family solidarity. The tension had simmered for weeks, with Mom increasingly stressed about Emma's disappointment and Dad working longer hours trying to rebuild the business. I tried to stay out of the drama, focusing on my own wedding planning and my demanding job at the marketing agency. Looking back, I should have recognized the warning signs, the way Mom's eyes lingered on my ring during family dinners, the way she asked detailed questions about its value and insurance coverage. Standing in that kitchen, watching her perform innocent concern while my engagement ring sat somewhere in her possession, I realized how naive I'd been about the people I trusted most. I set my purse down on the kitchen counter and pulled out my phone, opening the Photos app. The screen showed the last picture I'd taken of my ring 3 days ago when I dropped it off for cleaning. The sapphire caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the jewelry store window, every facet gleaming with the promise of my upcoming wedding. "Mom, I need you to look at something." I held up the phone, watching her face as she glanced at the image. Still nothing. No recognition, no guilt, just mild interest in what appeared to be a random photo. "That's my engagement ring, the one I took to Heritage Jewelers on Monday. The one that's missing." She wiped her hands on her apron and moved closer, squinting at the screen with the expression she used when trying to read small print without her reading glasses. "It's beautiful, honey. Why are you showing me this? Did something happen to it?" The genuine confusion in her voice made me question my own certainty for a moment. Could I have been wrong about the license plate? Could someone else have stolen my identity? "Someone impersonated me today and took it from the jewelry store. They tried to sell it immediately afterward." I watched every micro-expression, every slight shift in her posture. The store owner said this person claimed it was a family emergency, something about needing money for a honeymoon. Mom's stirring slowed slightly, but her expression remained neutral. "That's horrible, Sarah. Identity theft is such a serious crime these days." "Did the store have security cameras?" I hope they catch whoever did this to you. She turned back to the stove and adjusted the heat under the stew. You should call your bank too. Make sure they haven't access to any of your accounts. The performance was masterful, but I'd grown up watching Mom navigate difficult conversations. She had a tell she probably didn't realize I'd noticed over the years. When she was hiding something significant, she cleaned obsessively. Right now, she was wiping down counters that were already spotless, reorganizing spice jars that were perfectly arranged, scrubbing at invisible stains on the stovetop. The person who took my ring had identification, Mom. They knew details about our family. I kept my voice level, professional, the same tone I used during difficult client presentations. They also had my receipt from the jewelry store. How would a random identity thief know I had a ring being cleaned? And how would they get the pickup receipt? Mom paused in her cleaning, her back still turned to me. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe they went through your mail. Or your car. People can be very resourceful when they're desperate. She turned around, and I saw something flicker across her features before she composed herself again. The important thing is getting it back. Did the store owner say what happens next? The police are involved now. Officer Martinez is handling the case personally. I studied her reaction to this news. He said they have security footage of the person who took it. Clear images. It should be easy to identify them once they review the recording. This time, I caught it. A slight tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible intake of breath. She knew exactly who would be on that security footage, and it wasn't some random criminal. Well, that's good news then. Justice will be served. She moved to the refrigerator and began pulling out ingredients unnecessarily, keeping herself busy and avoiding direct eye contact. Mom, where's Emma right now? I asked the question casually, as if it had just occurred to me. I thought you two were having lunch today to discuss honeymoon details. Oh, we decided to postpone that. She's been so stressed about the whole Bali situation. I didn't want to add to her pressure by discussing something that might not happen. Mom's voice carried genuine sadness now, the first real emotion she'd shown since I'd arrived. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It breaks my heart, Sarah. She's worked so hard planning this perfect honeymoon, and now everything's falling apart because of your father's business problems. Here it was, the real conversation beneath our careful dance around the truth. Mom wasn't just protecting herself. She was protecting Emma's dreams, Emma's happiness, Emma's perfect life that had been disrupted by inconvenient financial realities. In her mind, taking my ring wasn't theft. It was problem-solving, maternal sacrifice, doing whatever it took to make sure her baby girl got everything she deserved. How much does the Bali trip cost? I kept my tone conversational, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Mom hesitated, clearly debating how much to reveal. Around $12,000 for 2 weeks. The flights alone are $4,000, and Marcus insisted on staying at those overwater bungalows he saw on Instagram. Emma's heart was set on it. $12,000. My grandmother's ring was worth approximately $8,000 according to the insurance appraisal Jake had gotten before proposing. Mom would have needed additional funds to cover the full honeymoon cost, but the ring would have been a substantial down payment, enough to book the flights and accommodations with a payment plan for the rest. That's a lot of money, I said carefully. I can understand why Emma's so disappointed about postponing the trip. It must feel like her dreams are crumbling. Mom's shoulders relaxed slightly at what she interpreted as sympathy for Emma's situation. Exactly. She's been through so much stress with the wedding planning, and then to have this happen right afterward. It's not fair to her. I nodded, letting Mom believe I was aligned with her priorities. It's terrible timing with Dad's business problems. If only there was some way to get the money quickly, without waiting for his contracts to recover. I was fishing now, trying to understand her complete thought process, the justification that had led her to steal from me. Sometimes you have to make difficult choices for the people you love, Mom said quietly, her back still turned as she unnecessarily rearranged items in the refrigerator. Sometimes being a mother means sacrificing your own comfort, your own peace of mind, to protect your children's happiness. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. She was admitting it without saying it directly, explaining her reasoning without acknowledging the crime. In her mind, she wasn't a thief. She was a mother doing what mothers do, putting her child's needs above everything else, including basic honesty and respect for family boundaries. What about my happiness, Mom? The question slipped out before I could stop it, raw and vulnerable in a way I hadn't intended. What about my wedding, my dreams, my trust in the people who raised me? Mom finally turned around, and I saw tears in her eyes for the first time since I'd arrived home. Your ring will be returned, Sarah. This will all be resolved. Emma's situation is temporary, but she can't get married again. This is her one chance for the perfect honeymoon, the perfect start to her marriage. And if she can't have the perfect honeymoon, that justifies stealing from me? I kept my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. That justifies betraying my trust? Lying to my face? Potentially getting arrested for theft? No one's getting arrested, Mom said firmly, the tears evaporating as quickly as they'd appeared. This is a family matter. Family problems get resolved within the family. You're being dramatic about something that can be fixed with a simple conversation. The sound of Dad's truck pulling into the driveway interrupted our tense standoff. Mom's expression shifted immediately, relief flooding her features as if reinforcements had arrived. I heard his work boots on the front steps, the familiar jingle of keys, and the heavy sigh he always made after long days managing construction crews under the Arizona sun. Linda, something smells incredible in here, Dad called out as he entered through the front door. His voice carried the forced cheerfulness he used when trying to lighten the mood after difficult days. Please tell me you made enough for leftovers because I could eat this for a week. David, perfect timing, Mom said, her voice bright with artificial enthusiasm. Sarah's home early. We were just discussing her ring situation. I watched Dad's face carefully as he processed this information. Unlike Mom's careful performance, Dad had never been good at hiding his emotions. His weathered features went through a series of expressions before settling on defensive concern. Ring situation? He looked between us, clearly calculating how much he should reveal about what he already knew. What's wrong with your ring, sweetheart? Someone stole it from Heritage Jewelers today, I said simply, studying his reaction. Impersonated me, took it during pickup, tried to sell it immediately afterward. The police are reviewing security footage to identify the thief. Dad's face went pale beneath his construction tan. He set his lunch cooler down heavily and moved to wash his hands at the kitchen sink, buying himself time to think. That's terrible news, Sarah. Identity theft is getting worse every year. Did they get away with it? The jewelry store refused to buy it because the person couldn't provide family history or explain the inscription. They became suspicious when she got agitated about additional verification. I emphasized the pronoun deliberately, watching Dad's shoulders tense. The thief was a woman, Dad, middle-aged, claimed it was a family emergency involving honeymoon funding. Dad dried his hands slowly, methodically, each finger individually, while his mind processed the implications. When he finally turned around, his expression had hardened into the stubborn set I remembered from childhood arguments about curfews and college choices. Sarah, family emergencies require difficult decisions sometimes. People do things they normally wouldn't do when they're desperate to help someone they love. His voice carried a defensive edge that confirmed my worst suspicions. He'd known about the plan. He'd probably helped coordinate it. So you think stealing from family members is acceptable when you're desperate? I kept my tone level, professional, but inside I felt something fundamental shifting. These weren't the parents who'd taught me about honesty and integrity. These were strangers who'd decided my future was less important than Emma's comfort. Mom moved closer to Dad, presenting a united front. Nobody's stealing anything, Sarah. This is a temporary borrowing situation that got complicated by miscommunication. Your ring isn't gone forever. We can resolve this maturely without involving outside authorities in private family matters. Miscommunication? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, you committed identity theft. You impersonated me at a jewelry store, provided false identification, and attempted to sell stolen property. That's not miscommunication. That's multiple felonies. Dad's jaw tightened. Don't threaten your mother with legal terminology, Sarah. She's trying to help your sister during a difficult time. Emma's happiness matters too, and she's been devastated about this honeymoon situation. Sometimes the older children have to make sacrifices for the younger ones. Sacrifices? The word came out sharper than I'd intended. Dad, this isn't about sacrificing my dessert so Emma can have seconds. This is my engagement ring. The ring Grandma specifically gave to Jake for our wedding. The ring that represents my relationship, my future, my connection to our family history. And it will represent all those things again once this situation is resolved. Mom interjected smoothly. Emma just needs a short-term solution to her honeymoon crisis. We'll figure out a way to compensate you for the inconvenience. Compensate me? I stared at them both, trying to understand how we'd reached this point where theft had become inconvenience, and my emotions had become unreasonable. You're talking about my grandmother's ring like it's a loan you can pay back with interest. Dad moved to the refrigerator and pulled out a beer, popping it open with more force than necessary. Your grandmother would want her ring to help family members in need. She was always generous with her resources when people she loved were struggling. Grandma was generous with her own resources, Dad. She didn't steal from one grandchild to help another. I felt tears threatening, but refused to let them see me cry. She gave this ring specifically to Jake for me. She chose who should have it next. You don't get to override her decision because Emma wants a luxury honeymoon. Mom's composure cracked slightly. Emma isn't asking for luxury, Sarah. She's asking for the honeymoon she was promised. The one we committed to funding. The one her new husband is expecting. Do you want her marriage to start with disappointment and broken promises? What about my marriage, Mom? Do you want mine to start with the knowledge that my own parents stole from me? That they valued Emma's vacation more than my trust? I could hear my voice rising but couldn't control it anymore. What do I tell Jake when he asks where the ring is? What do I tell our wedding guests when they notice it's missing from the ceremony? You tell them it's being repaired, Dad said firmly. You tell them there was a small issue with the setting that needed professional attention. By the time your wedding happens, this will all be resolved. By the time my wedding happens, you expect Emma's honeymoon to be paid for with money from selling my ring. I stated it as fact rather than a question. You expect me to lie to my fiancé and our families to cover up your theft. Mom's facade finally crumbled completely. Fine, Sarah. Yes, we took your ring. Yes, we're trying to sell it to fund Emma's honeymoon. Yes, we should have asked permission first. But we're asking now. We're explaining the situation and asking for your understanding and cooperation. You're not asking, Mom. You already took it. You're not requesting my cooperation. You're demanding my silence. I picked up my purse and car keys, suddenly desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere of justification and manipulation. You're asking me to be complicit in my own victimization. Where are you going? Dad's voice carried a warning tone I remembered from teenage years. We're not finished discussing this situation. Yes, we are finished, I said quietly. You've made your priorities clear. Emma's happiness matters more than my property, my trust, or my feelings. You've chosen your side in this family conflict. There are no sides, Sarah, Mom said desperately. We're all family here. Family supports each other through difficult times. Family makes sacrifices for each other. I paused at the kitchen doorway and looked back at them. Dad holding his beer like a shield. Mom twisting her wedding ring anxiously, both of them looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen them. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. You're right, Mom. Family does support each other. Family does make sacrifices. But what you did isn't support or sacrifice. It's theft justified by favoritism. I took a deep breath, feeling surprisingly calm despite the chaos in my chest. And I'm about to show you exactly what family loyalty looks like when it's not conditional on silent compliance. I drove straight to Jake's apartment complex, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as I tried to process what had just happened. The late afternoon sun blazed through my windshield, but I felt cold inside, like something essential had been ripped away from me. Not just my ring, but my entire understanding of who my parents were and what they valued. Jake's silver Honda was in its usual spot, which meant he was home from his software development job at the startup downtown. I sat in my car for several minutes, staring at his apartment building and trying to figure out how to explain that my own mother had stolen my engagement ring. The whole situation sounded insane even to me, like something that happened to other people in dramatic television shows, not to responsible adults with normal families. When I finally knocked on his door, Jake opened it wearing his favorite programming t-shirt, and the concerned expression he got whenever I showed up unexpectedly. "Sarah, hey, I wasn't expecting you until later. Everything okay?" He took one look at my face and immediately pulled me inside, wrapping his arms around me before I could even speak. "My ring is gone," I whispered into his shoulder, finally allowing the tears I'd been holding back to fall. "My mom took it. She actually stole my engagement ring to pay for Emma's honeymoon." The words sounded even more unbelievable when I said them out loud, like I was describing someone else's nightmare. Jake pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes searching my face for signs that this was some kind of misunderstanding. "Wait, what? Your mom took your grandmother's ring? How is that even possible?" He guided me to his couch, keeping one arm around my shoulders as if I might collapse. I told him everything. The call from Heritage Jewelers, the police officer, the security footage, the confrontation in my parents' kitchen, where they defended their actions as necessary family sacrifice. Jake listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail I shared. "So they're not denying it," he said finally, his voice carefully controlled. "They actually admitted to taking it, and they think that's acceptable behavior." Jake had always been logical, methodical in his thinking, but I could see anger building beneath his calm exterior. "They think Emma's happiness is more important than basic honesty," I said, wiping my eyes with the tissue he'd handed me. "They think because we're family, I should just accept being robbed and lied to. They want me to tell everyone the ring is being repaired so they can save face while selling it." Jake stood up and began pacing across his small living room, running his hands through his hair the way he did when debugging particularly frustrating code problems. "Sarah, your grandmother specifically gave me that ring for you. She talked to me for an hour about its history, about how it had belonged to her mother before her, about how she'd waited her whole life to find the right person to pass it to." The memory hit me like a physical blow. Grandma in her hospital bed last year, holding Jake's hand and telling him about the ring's journey through 3 generations of Mitchell women. How her own grandmother had brought it from Ireland as a young bride. How it had survived the Depression, 2 world wars, and countless family changes. How it was meant to protect and bless the marriages of women who understood the value of commitment and sacrifice. "She made me promise to take care of it and to take care of you," Jake continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She said the ring would know if it was loved and respected, and it would bring good luck to people who honored its history. How am I supposed to honor that history when your own parents have turned it into a commodity?" "I don't know," I admitted, feeling more lost than I'd ever felt in my life. "I keep thinking there has to be some explanation that makes sense, some way this isn't as bad as it seems." But they looked me in the eye and defended what they did. They actually think they're the victims here because I'm not cooperating with their plan. Jake stopped pacing and knelt in front of me, taking my hands in his. "Sarah, listen to me carefully. This isn't about the ring anymore, although that's incredibly important to both of us. This is about your parents believing they have the right to make decisions about your life, your property, and your future without your consent. This is about them treating you like a resource to be managed rather than a person to be respected." His words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. For years, I'd been the responsible daughter, the one who handled her own problems and didn't create drama for the family. I'd paid for my own education, found my own job, managed my own relationships, all while Emma had been supported, guided, and protected from every disappointment. My independence had been interpreted as not needing support, while Emma's dependence had been rewarded with unlimited assistance. "They've never stolen from Emma to help me," I said quietly, the realization hitting me with devastating clarity. "When I needed money for college, they told me to apply for scholarships and work part-time. When Emma needed money for her wedding, they took out loans and used their savings. When Emma needs money for her honeymoon, they steal from me." "Exactly," Jake said firmly. "And now they're expecting you to be grateful for the privilege of being robbed. They want you to thank them for choosing Emma over you again." I thought about all the times I'd watched Emma get special treatment while being told I was mature enough to handle disappointment. The family vacations planned around Emma's preferences, the birthday celebrations focused on making her feel special, the constant accommodation of her needs while mine were dismissed as less urgent. I'd accepted it as normal family dynamics, the natural result of being the older, more responsible child. "What do we do?" I asked Jake, genuinely uncertain about how to proceed. Do I call the police and have my own mother arrested? Do I let them sell my ring and pretend everything's fine? Do I demand they find another way to fund Emma's honeymoon and risk destroying our family relationships? Jake was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the implications of each option. What did Officer Martinez say about your choices? He said I could press charges for theft and identity fraud, or I could try to resolve it as a family matter first. But if the ring isn't returned voluntarily, criminal charges might be the only way to get it back. I felt sick thinking about my mother in handcuffs, about Dad's construction business suffering if he had to hire lawyers and pay bail money. Sarah, I need you to think about something, Jake said gently. If you let them get away with this, if you prioritize their comfort over your own rights, what message does that send? What happens the next time Emma needs something and they decide you should provide it? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I didn't want to consider. If I accepted being robbed to avoid family conflict, would that establish me permanently as the family member whose needs mattered least? Would Emma learn that stealing from siblings was acceptable as long as you called it family emergency? Would my parents continue making decisions about my life without consulting me? I can let them teach Emma that this is how families work, I said finally, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. I can't let her think it's okay to take things that don't belong to her just because she wants them more than the owner does. Jake squeezed my hands. So what's our next move? I'm going to give them one chance to do the right thing, I said, feeling stronger and more determined than I had all day. I'm going to offer them a clear choice and clear consequences. After that, they can decide for themselves whether they want to handle this as a family matter or a criminal matter. Jake helped me craft the message that would change everything. We spent 2 hours at his kitchen table, drafting and redrafting the text until every word carried exactly the weight I intended. No emotion, no pleading, just clear boundaries and transparent consequences. The kind of professional communication I used with difficult clients, except this time the difficult clients were my own parents. The text went to both Mom and Dad simultaneously. You have 24 hours to return my engagement ring to Heritage Jewelers, with a full apology to the staff for the attempted fraud. If the ring is not returned by 6 p.m. tomorrow, I will pursue criminal charges for theft, identity fraud, and attempted sale of stolen property. This is not a negotiation. This is your one opportunity to resolve this without legal consequences. Dad's response came within minutes. Don't threaten your family over a misunderstanding. Come home and we'll discuss this like adults. Mom's message arrived an hour later. Sarah, you're being unreasonable. Emma's entire future happiness depends on this honeymoon. We raised you better than this selfishness. I showed both messages to Jake, who shook his head in amazement. They're still trying to manipulate you. Even now, when they're facing criminal charges, they think they can guilt you into compliance. He was right. Neither parent had acknowledged wrongdoing, apologized for their actions, or shown any indication they understood the severity of what they'd done. That evening, Rachel called from Denver. My best friend since college had moved there 2 years ago for a marketing position with a tech startup, and we'd maintained our friendship through weekly video calls and monthly visits. When I told her what had happened, the silence on her end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Rachel, are you still there? I'm here. I'm just processing the fact that your mother committed multiple felonies to fund your sister's vacation. Her voice carried the disbelief I'd been feeling all day. Sarah, this is insane. Normal families don't steal from each other and then blame the victim for being upset about it. I know it sounds crazy, but they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. In their minds, Emma's needs are more important than my property rights. I was curled up on Jake's couch, phone pressed to my ear while he made dinner in the kitchen. They think family loyalty means accepting whatever they decide is best for the family unit. That's not family loyalty, that's emotional abuse, disguised as tradition, Rachel said firmly. Sarah, I've been wanting to tell you this for years, but your parents have always treated you like the family servant. You've been so busy being the responsible daughter that you've never noticed how differently they treat you compared to Emma. Her words hit harder than I expected because I'd been thinking the same thing all day. Every childhood memory I'd revisited since the jewelry store incident revealed the same pattern. Emma's needs prioritized, my needs minimized, my compliance expected, and my resistance punished. I gave them an ultimatum, I told Rachel. 24 hours to return the ring or I press charges. Good. And when they don't return it, because we both know they won't, what's your plan? Rachel's tone suggested she already knew what I needed to hear. Sarah, you can't stay in Phoenix after this. Whether they return the ring or get arrested, your relationship with your parents is fundamentally changed. They've shown you who they really are. She was right. Even if Mom returned the ring tomorrow with a tearful apology, I would never again trust her with anything important. Even if Dad acknowledged that stealing from me was wrong, I would always know that he'd prioritized Emma's comfort over my basic rights. The foundation of our family relationship had cracked beyond repair. Come to Denver, Rachel continued. I'm serious. My company is expanding the marketing department, and they're looking for someone with your experience. The cost of living is reasonable, the city is amazing, and you'll be far enough away to build a life without constant family drama. Jake appeared in the doorway, having overheard enough of the conversation to understand what Rachel was suggesting. He nodded encouragingly, mouthing yes with more enthusiasm than I'd seen from him all day. We'd talked about relocating together eventually, but always in vague someday terms. This crisis had accelerated our timeline dramatically. I can't just abandon my job and move across 3 states because my parents disappointed me, I protested, but even as I said it, I knew I was trying to convince myself rather than Rachel. You're not abandoning anything, Sarah. You're choosing yourself for the first time in your adult life. You're choosing a future where your needs matter as much as everyone else's. Rachel's voice softened. Honey, you've spent years being the daughter who doesn't cause problems, who handles everything independently, who sacrifices her own interests to keep the family peace. Look where that got you. The next morning brought a series of increasingly desperate messages from my parents. Mom's texts evolved from righteous indignation to bargaining to outright begging. Sarah, please reconsider. Emma is heartbroken. We can find another solution if you'll just give us more time. Dad's messages took a different approach, focusing on family reputation and community standing. Think about what this will do to our family's name in the neighborhood. Think about how this affects your father's business relationships. Think about Emma's marriage starting with this kind of drama. Neither of them offered to return the ring. At 4 p.m., with 2 hours remaining before my deadline, Emma herself finally called. I'd been expecting this conversation, but hearing her voice still made my chest tighten, with familiar guilt and protective instincts. Sarah, I can't believe you're doing this to our family over a piece of jewelry. Her voice was thick with tears, but underneath the emotion, I heard something else. Entitlement. Even now, facing the collapse of her honeymoon plans, she couldn't understand why I wouldn't simply accept being robbed for her benefit. Emma, this isn't about jewelry. This is about Mom committing crimes and then expecting me to be grateful for the privilege. I kept my voice steady, professional, the same tone I'd use with an unreasonable client. This is about our parents teaching you that stealing is acceptable as long as you call it family emergency. But it is a family emergency, Emma insisted. Marcus's family already thinks we're poor because of Dad's business problems. If we can't afford our honeymoon, they'll never respect me. They'll think Marcus married beneath him. So let Marcus's family pay for your honeymoon if their opinion matters so much, I suggested. Let Marcus get a second job or a loan. Let you get a job and contribute to your own vacation fund. But don't expect me to fund your social status by accepting theft. Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a coldness I'd never heard from her before. I always knew you were jealous of me, but I never thought you were this vindictive. Mom and Dad are right about you. You've always been selfish, but you hide it behind being responsible. The accusation should have hurt, but instead, I felt oddly relieved. Emma had finally shown me her true feelings, the resentment and superiority she'd been hiding behind sweet sister dynamics for years. She genuinely believed she deserved whatever she wanted, regardless of who had to sacrifice to provide it. You're right, Emma. I am selfish. I'm selfish enough to want my own property returned. I'm selfish enough to expect honesty from people who claim to love me. I'm selfish enough to refuse being robbed for your convenience. I looked at Jake, who was listening from across the room and nodding encouragingly. And I'm selfish enough to choose my own happiness over your approval. At exactly 6 p.m., I called Officer Martinez and informed him that my family had chosen not to return the stolen property. Within an hour, he called back to confirm that arrest warrants had been issued for Linda Mitchell on charges of identity theft, fraud, and attempted sale of stolen property. That night, Jake and I began planning our move to Denver. Rachel had already spoken to her company's HR department about fast-tracking my interview process. Within a week, I had a job offer with a 20% salary increase and full relocation assistance. 3 weeks later, Jake and I drove away from Phoenix with everything we owned packed into a rental truck. My parents had been released on bail, their trial scheduled for 2 months later. Emma's honeymoon had been canceled, and according to mutual friends, her marriage was already showing strain under the financial pressure and family scandal. I felt no satisfaction in their suffering, but I also felt no guilt about my choices. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen my own future over their expectations. I had learned the difference between family loyalty and family exploitation, between love and manipulation, between sacrifice and martyrdom. 6 months later, Rachel and I were having coffee in downtown Denver when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Tommy, Emma's new husband, asking if I would consider meeting for coffee during their upcoming visit to Denver. He wanted to apologize for his family's role in the crisis and to understand my perspective on what had happened. I stared at the message for a long time before showing it to Rachel. "What do you think?" "I think some people learn from their mistakes, and some people repeat them forever," she said thoughtfully. "The question is, which kind of person do you think Tommy is?" Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.